Are you brand new to bag making and you're completely confused between the difference of woven interfacing, stabilizers, or that there's even a difference between the two? Well, stick around and I'll go over some of the most commonly used woven interfacings and stabilizers in bag making. I prepared some samples today for us so that we can take a look at what the woven interfacing and the stabilizers look like, ironed onto some quilting cotton as well as some marine vinyl. We'll be switching intermittently over to the overhead camera so that way you can get a closer look of those. All right, we're going to go ahead and start by talking about woven interfacing. When is woven interfacing used in bag making? Well, basically, anytime you're using quilting cotton fabric, you want to go ahead and use woven interfacing on it. So let me pull my sample here for you of the quilting cotton that I have woven interfacing ironed onto it. So here is that sample. And here's a sample of just quilting cotton with no interfacing on it. So you can see that it's got a little bit more stability to it. But what it really does for your quilting cotton fabrics is it removes that one-way stretch that you can find in your quilting cotton. So now there is no longer a stretch in here. So it gives it a little bit more weight, but it's not providing any structure for your bag for the most part. So you want to go ahead and use some sort of stabilizer if you're looking for some structure in your handbags. Woven interfacing does not need to be trimmed away from your seam allowance. So you can see in this sample right here, I have the woven interfacing going right up to the edge of the cut fabric. Whereas with this piece of Decovil Light, I have removed it from the seam allowance. So if my seam allowance was 3/8 of an inch, I made sure that it was 3/8 of an inch smaller on all of the four sides. Woven interfacing can be purchased from any local big box store such as Walmart and Joann Fabrics. However, you can go ahead and support a small online business by purchasing their version of a woven interfacing. I personally carry woven interfacing on my website now. This is my So Woven Fusible interfacing, and this is what it looks like, but it's not ironed onto anything. So it basically looks like a piece of white quilting cotton, but the back side of the woven interfacing has glue on it that allows you to iron it on or use a heat press to secure it to the wrong side of your fabrics. So you can go ahead and purchase this in 5-yard increments on my website at sewyours.com if you're interested. I want to talk about one other form of interfacing. The manufacturer refers to this as an interfacing. However, I would actually call it a lightweight stabilizer, and that is the Pellon 987F Fusible Fleece. This is a one-sided fusible fleece interfacing. And here is a sample of it so you can take a look at it. And just like with the woven interfacing, there is glue on one side of it so you can iron it on to the wrong side of your fabric. And here is my sample of some quilting cotton with the fusible fleece ironed to the back side. And you can see it has a lot more structure than it does with the woven interfacing. I began my bag making journey about 20 years ago, and this was long before YouTube, so I didn't really like to read the store-bought patterns, so I just self-drafted my patterns, and I knew that I needed something to give my bags a little bit more weight and stability, but I had no clue about interfacing and stabilizers at that time, so I just went to Joann Fabrics. I asked the sales associate, and she pointed me to the fusible fleece. So for the next 10 years, that's what I used on all of my handbags. So let's go ahead and take a look at a handbag I've made with some fusible fleece interfacing. Here is the Cali crossbody. This is a pattern available on my website at sewyours.com. And you can see it's a slouchy plush bag. Now this is a lightweight vinyl for the exterior. And then for the lining, I went with quilting cotton, and I did use woven interfacing on the quilting cotton as well. And here's a look what she looks like on my shoulder. So you can see, again, it's a soft, slouchy bag. So if that's the look you're going for your handbag, I recommend fusible fleece. All right, let's go ahead and talk about stabilizers now. Stabilizers are what give our handbags shape, structure, and allow them to stand up on their own. Now, after I graduated from using the fusible fleece interfacing, I started to use one-sided fusible foam stabilizer. And I really liked the look that the fusible foam gave me. So let me show you a couple of samples of some bags that I made with the fusible foam. So here is my Martini crossover bag, and as you can see here, there is no wrinkles. It stands up on its own, no problem, and I'm pushing down on it, and it's really holding its shape. So a lot different than the fusible fleece. This one was made with a lightweight denim and a quilting cotton for the exterior, and then the lining quilting cotton. I used woven interfacing like I always do on all of my quilting cotton pieces. So we've just got the one-sided fusible foam on this bag. Now, there is one disadvantage that I would say with fusible foam, and that is because sometimes you'll experience your fabric wrinkling when you're trying to iron onto your fusible foam, and that can be very frustrating and can kind of ruin the look of your bag that you're making. So that's why I've kind of geared away from using fusible foam myself. But let me show you some samples here. So here's some quilting cotton again, and I've got the one-sided fusible foam ironed onto it, and you can see here it holds up just fine on its own. With stabilizers, you want to make sure that you're always keeping them outside of your seam allowances, like I've done on this sample right here. But there is one type of foam stabilizer that is a sew-in only version, which I do like to use because you don't get the wrinkles like you do with the fusible foam. And I've got a little trick for you on that. So what you can do is you cut down your foam to the size that you need it to. Take that over to your sewing machine with a zigzag stitch, and you're going to go ahead and run the zigzag stitch along the outside edge of your piece, and then you're going to base stitch that onto your fabric. Likewise, if you have a serger like I have right here, you could take that over to your serger and go around the outside edges and then base stitch it to your fabric like I've done right here. And that's going to compress down that foam so that it's not so bulky in your seams. Next, let's go ahead and talk about Decovil Light, which I would say is probably one of the most widely used stabilizer in bag making, and it is actually now my preferred stabilizer of choice. I find it's the easiest to work with, and I love the outcome of my handbags when I'm using Decovil Light. So here is that sample I showed you earlier with the Decovil Light out of the seam allowances on quilting cotton, and you can see it's holding its shape pretty well. Here is marine vinyl with nothing on it. And here's marine vinyl with Decovil Light on it. So you can see it's got a lot more structure than the vinyl by itself. Now, Decovil Light is costly, and that's kind of why I avoided it for a while. I just thought it was quite pricey. I just didn't understand why I would spend that much money on something that I'm using inside of my handbags, but it was on sale one time. I tried it out and I got hooked. So now that's all I use. I basically wait until Joann's has their 50% off sale, and then I go ahead and stock up on their Decovil Light. Let me go ahead and show you a handbag that I've made with Decovil Light. So here is my Duplicity handbag, another pattern on my website that you can purchase. I've used the white marine vinyl for the exterior with the Decovil Light on it. I used quilting cotton with the woven interfacing on it. And you can see here that it's got good structure to it. It's holding up on its own. And let me lift it so that you can see it. So it's holding up on its own. Nice substantial bag. This is really similar to what you're going to find at any retailer selling handbags. So I really like the look that Decovil Light gives to your handbags. Okay, let's talk about Decovil Heavy next. Now, Decovil Heavy is primarily used in the bottoms of handbags. It's going to give a little bit extra structure to the base of your bag so that way they're not sagging. So here I have a piece of marine vinyl with Decovil Heavy on it, and let me show you in comparison to the Decovil Light. So these are the same fabrics, and I'm bouncing them around here so you can really see it. This one is a little bit more floppier than the one with Decovil Heavy on it. So use Decovil Heavy in the bottoms of your handbags. Sometimes you might want to use them in flap closures. It gives it a little bit more structure as well. So the last stabilizer that I wanted to talk about today was the Pellon Peltex 71F. Now this is a stabilizer that I don't use very often, but I thought it was worth mentioning since I do have a sample of it for you. And I did use it in one of my most recent patterns. So let me show you the Decovil Heavy again with the marine vinyl. And here is the Pellon Peltex with the marine vinyl. So they're almost the same, but you're going to get a little bit more stability with the Pellon Peltex. It's a pretty rigid stabilizer. The downfall with that is I find it's quite difficult to actually iron on to the vinyl because you're kind of playing around with the length of time that you're trying to iron it on. You're trying to get that glue activated, but yet you don't want to melt your vinyl itself. And you can see right here, I've tried several times to get this to iron on to the vinyl, and it's still pulling away. So that is one downside. You could Go ahead and leave it in your seam allowances and base stitch it on if you wanted to, but I wouldn't recommend it myself. So you're really going to have to play around with the length of time that you want to press that onto your fabric without melting your fabric itself. Alternatively, you could go ahead and use some spray adhesive to keep that in to place and secure it onto your fabric itself. So let me show you the zip and grip, which I used the Pellon Peltex on. So here is the latest sewing pattern that's on my website, and the bottom panel, which wraps around the back to the bottom of the bag right here, I went ahead and used some of the Peltex on it. So you can see it's nice and rigid, whereas the front panel and the top panel right here, I used the Decovil Light. So I just wanted a little bit more stability for this particular piece, so that way it has a lot more structure to it, and I really like how it came out. The other ways that you would use the Pellon Peltex basically is a bottom of your bags again. So for instance, this isn't the perfect example, but for the bottom of this particular handbag, you would just cut a piece that is outside of your seam allowances, and you're going to iron it onto your bottom panel right here, and that'll prevent your handbags from sagging whenever there is items inside of it. I recommend keeping all of your usable scraps of interfacing and stabilizers. I keep mine in these cubbies right here, perfect for smaller projects. Here's a couple of tricks for how I iron on my fusible interfacings and stabilizers. I always like to start with a sheet of Teflon on my workstation. I place the fabric wrong side up, and then I place the interfacing or stabilizer glue side down to the wrong side of the fabric. And then I top that off with another sheet of Teflon paper, and then I go ahead and use my iron to press it into place. It's always going to depend on the fabrics that I'm using or the interfacings that I'm using for how long I need to go ahead and iron it. Generally, I like to go ahead and press it a little bit and check to see if it is securing into place. Now, the reason that I use the Teflon is that it protects my workspace as well as my iron from any glue transferring over. Now, I personally love to use my heat press for securing interfacings and stabilizers to my fabrics. I find that it's much quicker and more efficient to do it in that manner. I recently picked up the Singer heat press from Facebook Marketplace, and I don't know how I went without it. It's been a game changer. It saved me so much time, and if you have the room for a heat press, I highly recommend that you go ahead and pick one up yourself. I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description box below to the Teflon paper, as well as a similar model of my Singer heat press that you can go ahead and purchase on Amazon if you'd like. When ironing or pressing stabilizer to vinyl, you want to be very careful not to melt your vinyl. So you really have to make sure that you're not pressing too long. When I use my heat press, I give it about 3 seconds. So I close the lid, then I count 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, and then I go ahead and open it back up. I check to see if the stabilizer is secured to the vinyl. I also check the right side of the vinyl to make sure that no melting is occurring, and then if everything is good, it's secured into place, I'm finished. But if it's not, I usually like to let it cool down just a little bit, and then I repeat that process and see if it is then secured into place, which generally the second time around it definitely is. Now, like I said earlier in the video, Peltex can take a lot longer, and sometimes you just have to revert to using some sort of spray adhesive to keep it into place. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope that this video was helpful for you. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments box below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you have any tips or tricks to offer to other bag makers, also go ahead and leave them in the comments box below so we can help each other out. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye-bye.